Let's get right to it and welcome in Ken Wiebe from the Winnipeg Free Press. Jonathan Toews. We heard the quote from Scott Arniel.
Yeah, he's day to day. Kind of tweaked something the other night in the game and just didn't feel like we wanted to push that any farther. So just day to day.
How optimistic should Jet fans be that he will be in that lineup a week from today?
Yeah, I would say it would be on the positive ledger of optimistic, Huss. Yeah, I mean, we were all wondering, we saw the rosters come out. You're wondering, is that a good sign? Is that, because I think previously injured players were not listed on the practice rosters, but I don't think this was any type of tomfoolery on behalf of the Jets or anything. I think it was, Jonathan was going to see how he felt in the morning. He got treatment today. Huss, out of the corner of our eye, we saw him walking with his backpack to a team sanctioned or a league meeting today. So that's all we have. We know Jonathan is walking. And we know that from what Scott Arniel has said, it would fall under the day-to-day. Now, I understand the skeptical folks that are saying, well, sometimes day-to-day is really week-to-week and all of those things. But I would just put it this way. The level of concern from Scott Arniel on Saturday after Dylan Samberg left the game versus the, posture and tone of Scott Arniel, A, on the CJOB postgame and B, today with members of the media, was much different. So I would say it's more on the day-to-day side of things. And I mean, again, the Jets have a full week of practice until they play their opener. Barring some sort of setback, I would expect that this is a minor lower body issue. Huss, this is very common. And I know some folks are saying, it's because he's 37 and he's been off for 2 years. Huss, the most finely tuned athletes often leave practices and or exhibition games normally with a groin injury or soft tissue or something of that nature. So, to your point about, I'm watching that game on a computer screen versus being in the building, but what we know, there were no tangible signs of an obvious, like hobbling off the ice scenario. Now, again, it's different than being in person. I get it. But I don't, again, walking versus walking boot or anything like that. I would say it would be on the minor side. And I would be surprised if he's not ready for the opener. We know how hard he's been working to get ready. We know how fit he is. I think this is probably just a thing where you got to be off the ice for a couple days. I don't expect him to play. We know Jonathan wanted to play in the last preseason game because there was a week off between games. But I would expect him still to be ready for game one here.
In his absence,
yep.
Interesting to see today that Parker Ford was with the guys that we sort of assume will be the fourth line. And the Gus Bus, the original Gus Bus, I guess we have two now, with the, with some of the guys that would be more extras. What's been your observations on Parker Ford, and how much has he done for his stock in the eyes of the coaching staff, do you think, over the course of the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, I would even just say, Huss, it kind of rewinds almost to, last February, March, when he made his debut and scored in Boston, hour away from his home city, a team he grew up against. And the only thing that prevented Parker Ford from not playing more than 3 games last year, Huss, was the fact he got injured with the Moose very shortly after he was sent back down after that, first NHL action. So, one thing we know, we've heard Scott Arniel, and dating back to Rick Bowness, they place a pretty high value on faceoffs when it comes down to the 4C job. And Parker Ford's been doing an exceptional job on that front. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Scott Arniel cited, I think, 8-1 for Parker Ford on Tuesday in Minnesota or in St. Paul. So, I would say that's part of it, Huss. And I also think the other part of it is that when Tanner Pearson is on that fourth line, they're looking for a little bit more speed down the middle. We know that, Cole Koepke brings a lot of speed, and he looked really good on Tuesday, probably his best of the exhibition action so far. I think Ford has a slight advantage in the foot speed department over Gustafson, even though Gustafson's worked incredibly hard on that part of his game over the last 3-4 years here. But he's a little bit more of a physical player, Parker Ford. He gets involved physically. He's good on the forecheck. And again, Gustafson does a lot of things, and you know how I feel about him as a player and as a person. But right now, I think they're opting for a little bit more speed on that front. But again, this is something where might be more related to how the exhibition's going to go. And like I said, I don't, Jonathan may wake up tomorrow and say, I'm ready to go, I'm in the game, but I don't expect him to be playing. So I think this is more just a matter of, we know that when Toews is not available, if that's the case at any point this year, Nemestikov would be the first guy to go up. And we know that Morgan Barron has filled in for Adam Lowry before. And if Nemestikov goes up, Barron can go from the fourth line to the third line with a pretty smooth transition, giving that line a different look. But we're seeing it. Parker Ford is effective. He was effective in his game against Calgary the other day. A really nice goal, burying the pass from Jared Anderson-Dolan on the back door. He had one of those chances earlier on in the preseason where he missed the backdoor tap. But that's a good sign for him. But he's a high energy guy, a high motor guy, and we know the Jets have been talking so much about compete during this training camp. Being harder to play against, Parker Ford could help the Jets be that. So. We've seen some of the similarities from Walker Duehr's game at times when he's going. He can be a physical force. He can get in on the forecheck. He can skate also. But yeah, right now Parker Ford appears to have the leg up in the battle for the 13th forward position. But, I don't think it means that Gustafson is out of the race by any stretch of the imagination. But it was something that, people took notice of this morning when we got to the rink and saw the first few line rushes.
Let me ask you this. Just while we're talking about that, the fourth line and that 13th forward. Tanner Pearson, has he earned that spot, or is he sort of there because he's a veteran and, you start there? And I guess my question to you is he going to be a regular this year, or is he being pressed now by some younger players that might be able to come in and certainly add more speed to that lineup? Just thoughts on his fit right now and what it'll take for him to be a regular and not get passed by some of these guys that are challenging right now.
Yeah, Huss, we've been talking about this at the rink today too. And Tanner Pearson is a guy that, has he jumped off the page during the exhibition games? Not necessarily, but Huss, what you notice on the day-to-day when you're at practice and on the daily, he's a guy who's incredibly big and strong. He gets to the net. He's very sound defensively. He's a smart guy. He can kill penalties. We've referenced his heavy shot multiple times ever since the captain skates. Again, I'm not saying he's in cruise control mode by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that once the games get going, you're going to see him be a little bit more impactful. In terms of your other question about where he slots in, how, he's going to have to play well. He is getting pushed. That's for sure, Huss. I agree with you there. But I do think that he is, based on his experience and his Stanley Cup winning pedigree, I think this is a guy the Jets want to have around the team. I think he's going to be in the lineup regularly. I don't know if that means 75 games or 55 games at this stage of the game, but I do think that Tanner Pearson is going to be someone that does do a little bit better job of catching your attention as the games get rolling into the regular season here. Now, again, for a team that plays fast and wants to play with pace, now he's going to have to be pushed on that front as well. But he's also a guy who brings a lot of smarts to the table, hockey sense, really good defense. He's a very conscientious defensive player. And he's a guy who's, even last year, Huss said it was a 12-goal guy. So if you're a fourth line player and you're producing double digits in goals, that's something we've seen from the Jets' fourth line as they've moved along here. But again, some of that's going to be related to injury and, when Lowry's back and if they're healthy from there. But yeah, I do see him being more than just a part-time player. But as you mentioned, whether we're talking about Nikita Chibrikov or Walker Duehr or even Jared Anderson-Dolan, these guys all bring a little bit of a different element to the equation. It'll be a matter of how Pearson fits in, how he picks up the system, and if he can still be productive. And in speaking with Tanner Pearson early on in training camp, Huss, I get the sense that he knows exactly what he's up against. He knows that, last year that you're north of 30, you had to take a PTO, but you were on a Stanley Cup contender. He came to a Stanley Cup contender now. He knows that nothing is guaranteed for him, but he also knows and believes that he can bring something to the table that brings value to a team like the Jets that is battling and wanting to be a legit Stanley Cup contender. So, I think that he understands where he fits in. And in order to keep that job, he's going to have to deliver some strong performances at both ends of the rink.
Ken, just talking about this, and especially with Ford, and if Gustafson's on the outside looking in. He's a guy that we're both big fans of, and I think that can play. And, if he's the 13th forward, okay, putting him on waivers, we've been talking a lot about defensemen going on waivers. A guy like David Gustafson that I had always thought would be on the team to start off with, if he's on the outside looking in, potentially exposing him, I think, could be somewhat problematic for the club. With the Samberg injury, knowing that 7 of the 8, is it more likely that they might go 14-7 now based on the current situation than before? Do you think it'll be 13 and they'll just keep all the defensemen? And, if it comes down to a Heinola or a Stanley or whoever from the blue line being exposed, they would be more likely to put a player that they've also put a lot into and a second-round pick like Gustafson on the wire?
Yeah, so I would put it this way. I don't think the Jets are going to have Parker Ford as the 13th forward. I think it's much more likely that Gustafson would fill that role. The more likely way of Parker Ford being on the team is if one of those centermen has to be on IR to start the year. But again, I don't think we're in that situation yet either. Are the Jets open to exposing David Gustafson to waivers? I mean, that's your question. And I don't know the answer to that, Huss. I mean, I right now, I don't know that answer. I don't think they're going to be leaning towards 14-7 just based on the fact that Samberg is going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. I just see it's much more likely they would expose a forward to waivers than a defenseman based on the depth in the organization and also the depth, with guys knocking on the door and being ready. Quite frankly, they don't know how it's going to work out in terms of the, who's going to work well with Pionk. We know today it was Logan Stanley's turn. We know Hayden Fleury has played that role before. So I think that on the back end, things are set. With Cale Clegg clearing waivers today, I think the Jets are thankful for that. It means Clegg is going to be able to go down to the minors and play with Elias Salomonsson, and he would be available if they need another left shot defenseman. Anderson Dolan and Samuel Fagemo also cleared waivers, which I think the Jets would be thrilled about as well. So, I don't think, there were no Jets on waivers today, Huss, for those who didn't see it at just after 1:00. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out with Gustafson. But I would just put it this way. The only way that Parker Ford, to me, I'm not saying he can't be the 13th forward, but as a guy who is waivers exempt just for this one more season, Huss, I think it's much more likely we would see Gustafson on the opening day roster than Parker Ford. But again, that's not set in stone. That's my personal opinion, just based on how they feel about depth and where things are at. But if Parker Ford could be in the opening day lineup, I think that maybe that changes the equation a little bit too, as well, in terms of what the thinking is there. But I know he's not an older player, but he's a guy who came out of college, so he's got a little bit more. He's still young in terms of experience, but he's a guy that definitely is in the Jets' plans moving forward. But again, I don't think the Jets are turning their back on Gustafson, and I don't think he's necessarily on the outside looking in, even though today Parker Ford was rolling at 4C. I think that's more, maybe be matchup related for the game in Calgary, or, the fact he's a right-handed shot center and they wanted to test something else out here today, Huss. But that also, too, that's a reminder that Parker Ford is having a very solid training camp as well, and he's definitely under consideration moving forward.
Ken Wiebe's with us from the Winnipeg Free Press. Wiebe, let me ask you this. Let's get the Wiebe-meter out. Who has had the best camp? And on the other end of it, who has maybe not shown as much as you would have expected?
Yeah, honestly, Hassan, I'm not trying to duck the question here. I just don't. The day-to-day until the second week of camp to me is not as important as it is to, the casual, I understand hardcore fans want to know what happens a day in and day out and how that improves someone's chances. I think this is the really important week, whether it started on Monday with practices, but I don't think that the Jets have had anybody that has been lackluster or Huss. And everyone knows the standard here. I don't think anyone came in lagging, is in terrible shape, and is in danger of losing their job. And I also don't think that anyone has really come out of a rocket ship and stolen a job. As I wrote in the Free Press today, Huss, I think that in terms of prospects who boosted their stock the most at this camp, I cannot imagine someone has boosted their stock more than Colby Barlow, even though he was reassigned to the Manitoba Moose. Huss, if you're looking 12 months ago to today, he's skating so much better. He was way more involved last year. We understand things happen and whatever else, and different types of development curves and everything else. But Colby didn't have a good camp last year. Like, quite frankly, he did not show well at training camp. His skating was not at a level that it needed to be at. And you can tell he put in the work in the summertime, and he heeded the advice last fall, and he heeded the advice going into, after development camp and throughout his summer. He openly talked about changing his body, getting leaner. He's skating better. He's one of the guys who has one of the best shots in the organization in terms of the prospects that are coming up. And Braden Yager also has a great shot. But to me, Colby Barlow has had the most impactful camp in terms of showing, a 12-month improvement. Also, Danny Zhilkin, I would include in that category. I just think that Barlow is a little bit more of a top-rated prospect than Zhilkin. But Zhilkin went from kind of just being another guy in the organization to having a strong prospect showdown in Montreal. He had a very good training camp. He had a very strong showing in the exhibition games. I think he's poised to have his best season as a member of the Manitoba Moose. I would say those two guys really popped off the page up front. On the back end, we've talked a lot about Elias Salomonsson, and yes, it is unfortunate that he did not have an opportunity to play in that third preseason game because he got sick on the morning of that game. But there's just a little bit more work that needs to be done for him, and I understand that folks are arguing, well, try him in the top four. I just think that right now at this stage of his career, and Huss, we've been talking about this since the summertime, this isn't Elias Salomonsson is down for good for this year, but the benefit of him going down and playing 20 to 22 minutes a game, being exposed to all different situations, I think that we will see Elias Salomonsson and Huss maybe even potentially before the Dylan Samberg return happens in that 6 to 8 week window. But I'm totally on board with him being assigned to play and gain confidence and get a ton of puck touches with the Moose at the start of this year. I'm not saying this is a Kyle Connor situation of way back when he played the 4 games and Matthew Perreault got hurt and suddenly he was on the top line and never looked back. But what I am saying is that, you might see Elias Salomonsson by November or at the start of November, depending on how things shake down and how that Pionk and whoever pairing is working. And then maybe they're going to think about Colin Miller or Neil Pionk or Dylan DeMello or Luke Shen on the left side. And then you see what Elias looks like on the third pair. But I know there's been a big uproar on socials, and you see it, I see it in my inbox. Elias Salomonsson is not ready to play in the second pairing for the Winnipeg Jets on October 2nd of 2025. But that's not to say that he's not going to make his debut at some point before the calendar flips. That's sort of how I see this. But he had a fairly strong camp, Huss, but I've said this before on the show and in other places. Elias' second preseason game was not as good as his first, and that's not the reason he was sent down either. It's just a reminder that in a game with only 7 NHLers on the opponent, it wasn't domination station for him, and you don't expect it to be. So this is not a referendum on readiness for Elias Salomonsson. I think there is going to be time for him to be in this lineup this year. I fully expect him to make his debut, and if there's a possibility he could get double digits in games, depending on how things shake down, how the injury front goes. But not having him on the roster is not some colossal blunder by Kevin Cheveldayoff and company right now. But now it's up for the players that are ahead of him on the depth chart to show that that's the case. And it's up to Salomonsson to dominate at the American League level and give the Jets no choice but to recall him at some point here in the next weeks or months or whatever the time frame is.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the conversation about even the possibility of him sticking around would have been different if it was one of the guys on the right side that had gotten hurt.
Sure.
But I
Agreed.
mean, the thought of, let's bring this guy in, put him on the offside playing top 4 minutes. I mean, listen, young players, you want to put them in spots to succeed. And listen, there's certainly maybe being extra cautious or letting them over ripen, whatever the term you want to make is. But I think it's pretty clear what the task at hand for him to do is. And that's turn heads, play a ton of minutes, be at an elite level in the American Hockey League, and force the hand at some point when that opportunity comes, or just be so damn good that it's time to give him a chance and see what happens, and then work the other pieces around.